You didn't notice the moment everything shifted because it didn't feel dramatic. It felt like a small pause inside you, a quiet softening you didn't know how to interpret. Something in your awareness stepped back, and for a brief second the world felt slightly farther away than usual. You moved on with your day, but that moment stayed open behind you. It was the exact point where your old timeline released you. You didn't label it as a shift. You just felt a subtle disconnect from things you used to hold tightly. A conversation that didn't land. A plan that no longer felt alive. A version of yourself that felt slightly outdated, even though nothing obvious had changed. That sensation wasn't confusion. It was a signal. Your consciousness had already stepped into a direction your mind hadn't recognized yet. This is how real transitions begin, quietly. Not with fireworks, but with a tiny break in your usual pattern of feeling. The moment you stop resonating with an identity you've been carrying, reality responds by loosening around you. You sense this before you understand it. The world doesn't look different, but the way you inhabit it does. A softness, a distance, a moment of pause. That was the first sign. Most people brush past these moments because they seem too ordinary to matter. But they are the beginning of a new trajectory forming in the background. A shift doesn't start when your environment changes. It starts when your inner orientation subtly turns toward a life you haven't lived yet. You felt that turn. Even if you didn't name it, you felt it. A small inward motion that signaled you were done carrying what you had been carrying. And what makes this moment important is not that something ended, but that something else began forming immediately after. A new timeline doesn't wait. It builds itself the instant you release the old one. You may think you're still standing where you were before, but energetically, you've already taken the first step into a different version of your life. You're here now because the part of you that recognized that shift wants to understand what it stepped into. There is something unfolding behind the surface of your experience, something you've been sensing without being able to describe. This video will help you see what that moment truly was, and why everything that follows will start making sense in a way it hasn't yet. Keep watching. The quiet moment you dismissed was the doorway. Now it's time to understand what you walked into. There comes a moment when the world you've known begins to feel slightly out of tune, and it isn't because anything has changed on the surface but because the version of you that once fit there is no longer the one leading your life. Familiar rooms feel a little too quiet. Conversations drift past you without landing the way they once did. The roles you used to step into so naturally now feel like you're repeating lines from a script you've already outgrown. This isn't disconnection in the painful sense. It's the early sign that the timeline you once lived inside has stopped anchoring you. Your energy has already moved ahead, and everything still shaped around your previous identity feels like it's lagging behind. You might notice yourself observing your life rather than participating in it, not because you're detached or lost, but because your inner self has shifted its orientation. You're standing in the same places, but you're meeting them with a frequency that no longer matches what built them. This mismatch is not failure. It's confirmation. When a timeline completes, it doesn't collapse with noise, it simply stops resonating with who you've become, and the result is this quiet sense of distance. It's the natural shedding of a reality whose lessons are finished. You can still reach it, still move through it, but you no longer draw energy from it, and it no longer shapes you in return. What you're feeling is the space between identities, the gentle unwinding of a version of you that no longer leads your choices, and the early forming of the one that will. You're not supposed to feel fully at home right now. You're supposed to feel the shift. This is the earliest sign that you're stepping into a trajectory your mind hasn't fully met yet, and the moment you recognize it, the transition becomes easier to trust. Abrupt endings often feel unfair when they happen, as if something was taken from you before you had the chance to understand it, yet when you look closely there is a moment hidden inside each ending where a deeper intelligence within you had already released its hold, a quiet knowing that the path you were on could no longer carry who you were becoming. And even though your conscious mind may have wanted more time, more clarity, more closure, something in you had already stepped away. There is a rhythm to your life that doesn't always announce itself, a current that moves beneath thought, and when that current decides a chapter is complete, the external world simply follows its instruction. What feels like an abrupt stop is often your inner self catching up with a decision that was made on a level you have not yet learned to hear. Think back to the endings that surprised you. Before the moment they unfolded, there was usually a small shift inside you that you dismissed, a slight exhaustion around staying, a sense of repeating a lesson you no longer needed, a quiet recognition that the version of you who once belonged there was already fading. These sensations are not random. They are the first signals that a door is preparing to close, not to punish you, but to protect the trajectory you are meant to step into. When a path has given you everything it could, it cannot stay open, no matter how familiar or comforting it once felt. Your consciousness refuses to let you remain in places you've outgrown. Loss, when seen from the outside, looks like something taken. But from within, it is something released. It is the moment when life rearranges itself to match the truth of who you are now rather than who you were before. The relationship that ended, the opportunity that dissolved, the plan that fell apart, each one was a structure that could not stretch far enough to hold the next version of you. This is why clinging never works. The deeper intelligence guiding you will collapse anything that keeps you from aligning with the timeline meant for your expansion. There is a natural inevitability to this process. Doors do not close to trap you, they close to redirect you. They close because your energy has already left the room. They close because staying would require shrinking yourself back into an identity that no longer fits. And although the ending may feel sudden, the truth is that your inner being has been preparing you for it far longer than you realized. The closure you could not choose consciously was chosen for you compassionately by the part of you that sees farther than your fear. You are not meant to force old paths open again. You are meant to notice the space that appears when they shut, because that space is the first sign of the direction you are being pulled toward next. And if this truth resonates softly in you, subscribe so this journey can continue meeting you at each step of the path your deeper self has already begun to walk. There is a particular stillness that arrives after a timeline collapses, a quiet that doesn't feel like loss but something you can't quite name, and you may have mistaken it for numbness or fatigue, yet what you're feeling is your entire system stabilizing after releasing a reality it can no longer sustain. When an old field lets go of you, your nervous system begins to settle into the space that opens, and that settling feels different from anything you've associated with progress because it doesn't come with excitement or momentum, it comes with calm. A calm so subtle you might think nothing is happening at all. But this is the first sign that everything is happening. Your body always knows before your mind does. It recognizes when pressure has lifted, even if you haven't processed why. The quiet you feel is the absence of the old frequency you used to carry, the one that required effort and tension to maintain. When that field dissolves, your body enters a state it has been trying to reach for longer than you realized. The mind calls it emptiness because it's unfamiliar. But what it truly is regulation. Integration. Arrival. For so long you've been moving inside a timeline that demanded constant adjustment. You had to stay alert to its expectations, its rhythms, its emotional patterns. That hyper-attunement becomes normal when you live inside it long enough, so when the collapse happens and those demands disappear, it can feel like a sudden silence. Not a void, not a loss, just the absence of tension you didn't realize was there. The nervous system responds to this by softening, by slowing its signals, by uncoiling from the inside out. This is why you feel a strange, tender calm. Your body is meeting itself again without interference. Stillness is not a lack of movement. It is the first moment you're no longer being pulled in directions that don't belong to you. It's what happens when the noise of the old timeline fades and your system reorganizes itself around a new center. You might feel the urge to label this calm as stagnation, to wonder why you aren't more motivated or energized. But momentum can only return once the body trusts the ground beneath it, and that trust is built in silence. The pause you're experiencing is the foundation being laid for everything that comes next. Think of this calm as your inner landscape clearing itself. Old impulses have stopped firing. Old narratives have stopped echoing. The background pressure that shaped your choices has lifted. What remains is a quiet spaciousness, and within that spaciousness your new trajectory can begin to take form. You're not falling behind. You're settling in. And the fact that you can feel the calm at all means you've already arrived somewhere your past self could not reach. This stillness is not the end of your movement, it is the moment your movement becomes aligned. You may feel as though you're standing inside a life that technically still belongs to you, yet somehow no longer fits the way it used to, and this sensation can be confusing because nothing obvious has changed on the outside while everything feels subtly different on the inside. What's happening isn't dysfunction. It's transition. Your identity has already updated, but your environment is still arranged around an earlier version of you, and the mismatch between the two creates this strange sense of being slightly out of rhythm with your own days. You're not broken. You're ahead of your surroundings. There's a particular kind of disorientation that appears when your inner frequency shifts faster than your external reality, and you might notice it in the simplest moments. The places you used to move through on autopilot feel heavier or quieter. Habits that once felt natural now ask for effort you don't actually want to give. Even the choices you made automatically before might suddenly feel foreign, as if they were chosen by someone you don't fully recognize anymore. This is not a crisis. It's the earliest sign that your internal orientation is recalibrating toward the timeline you've already stepped into. Most people mistake this feeling for burnout, boredom, or emotional withdrawal, but the truth is much softer. You are not losing connection, you are shifting resonance. Your body and mind are adjusting to a frequency your environment hasn't caught up to yet. It's like speaking a new internal language while everything around you is still tuned to the old one. Nothing is wrong. The world is just responding to outdated information about who you are. This is why routines feel misaligned. It's why relationships may feel slightly out of sync even though nothing dramatic has occurred. It's why you might feel simultaneously present and detached, like you're moving through your life with a slight delay. The mismatch isn't a flaw. It's a signal that your identity has already stepped ahead and is waiting for your external world to follow. When you update on the inside, the old structures can no longer mirror you accurately. You feel the gap between who you were and who you're becoming, and that gap creates a temporary strangeness that the mind doesn't know how to label. But the body understands. It knows this is how new trajectories form. First the shift, then the adjustment, then the outward alignment. Your job isn't to rush the process or force everything to make sense. Your only task is to trust the sensation, to understand that feeling misaligned is not an indication that you're off path. It's proof that you've outgrown the frequency your current environment is built around. The strangeness is temporary. The mismatch is natural. And the moment your surroundings recalibrate to who you are now, the confusion dissolves and the path forward becomes unmistakably clear. You're not out of place. You're ahead of your place. And everything around you is simply learning how to meet the version of you that has already arrived. Synchronicities have always appeared in your life, but after a shift they begin to move differently, not as small curiosities or pleasant coincidences, but as threads being pulled in real time by the timeline you've stepped into. They gather around you with a new kind of precision, almost as if the world has started answering questions you haven't spoken out loud. This isn't imagination. It's responsiveness. A new timeline reacts quickly because it's shaped by a version of you that is no longer hesitating, no longer fragmented, no longer split between who you were and who you are becoming. When that internal clarity strengthens, the field reflects it back immediately. You might notice that certain numbers repeat themselves, not randomly but at moments when you're thinking of a specific decision or feeling a particular pull. People may say words you were just about to think. A message appears seconds after a doubt rises. An opportunity surfaces the moment you release something that kept you stuck. Synchronicities aren't appearing because you're suddenly paying more attention. They're appearing because the gap between your inner state and your outer experience is thinner than it used to be. The field doesn't have to work through dense layers to reach you anymore. It can speak directly. This is why the signs feel more like instructions now. They don't just confirm what you feel, they respond to it. The moment you lean towards something internally, the world shifts its weight to meet you. The moment you pull away from something, it begins to dissolve or reorganize. Guidance is no longer a delayed echo. It's immediate. It's conversational. As if the timeline itself is leaning in, waiting for your next signal. The key is recognizing that synchronicities are not here to predict your future. They are here to mirror your alignment. They show you where your energy is pointed. They show you what your emerging identity is trying to claim. When you see a sign, it's not the universe telling you what to do, it's the universe reflecting who you already are beneath the noise of old habits and old fears. The more you notice them, the clearer the conversation becomes. Your job is not to decode every symbol or chase meaning in every pattern. Your job is to feel the resonance. To sense which signs feel like a pull and which feel like a reminder. The field doesn't speak in riddles. It speaks in coherence. When something matches you, you feel it instantly, a subtle yes inside your body long before your mind catches up. That feeling is the instruction. You're learning how to read reality in a new way, not as a set of fixed circumstances but as a living dialogue between you and the timeline you've entered. Every synchronicity is a sentence in that conversation. Every repetition is emphasis. Every unexpected alignment is confirmation that you're not walking into your future alone. The field is responding to you now because you are finally resonating clearly enough for it to reach you. There were moments in your life that felt heavier than they should have been, moments where pressure built in ways you couldn't explain, and at the time it may have seemed like life was working against you, as if each challenge was another barrier placed in your way. But those moments were not punishments. They were turning points. They were the exact pressures that pushed you out of a timeline your deeper self knew you had already outgrown. Hardship didn't arrive to break you, it arrived to break the version of your life that could no longer carry your becoming. There is a kind of tension that forms when you stay in a reality that is too small for the person you are becoming. You feel it as frustration, stagnation, repeated patterns that grind against your spirit. The harder you try to make old structures work, the more they resist, not because you are failing but because your consciousness refuses to shrink itself to fit back inside them. Pressure builds when growth is being delayed. And eventually, something has to give. What gave was not you. It was the old trajectory collapsing under the weight of your expansion. If you look back at the hardest moments, you might notice something you didn't see at the time. Each hardship nudged you in a direction you wouldn't have chosen on your own. Each disappointment redirected your attention. Each loss disrupted a momentum that was leading you somewhere you no longer belonged. These moments weren't random. They formed a pattern. A sequence. A choreography of events designed to move you out of alignment with the life that had completed its purpose. You weren't being tested. You were being redirected. Your deeper intelligence knew that without pressure, you might have stayed where it was safe, where it was predictable, where you understood the rules. But safety often becomes a cage when your identity evolves. The discomfort you experienced was the signal that the old timeline could no longer support you, and the collapse you felt was simply the moment it stopped trying. This is why the shift felt inevitable in hindsight. You can trace the line back through each moment that hurt, each situation that closed, each truth that surfaced before you were ready to face it. Together, they form a single message: you were never meant to stay there. The path had to end so a new one could open, and the only force strong enough to move you was the pressure you tried so hard to avoid. When you see hardship through this lens, the past softens. You no longer view your struggles as failures or flaws in your character. You see them as catalysts. As markers of transition. As the necessary friction that opened the doorway you are now walking through. Nothing was taken from you that was meant to remain. Nothing collapsed that was capable of carrying the next version of you. You weren't pushed down. You were pushed forward. There were times when you pushed with everything you had, times when you tried to make something work by sheer effort, persistence, or hope, and no matter how much energy you poured into it, nothing moved the way you needed it to. You may have blamed yourself for that. You may have wondered why your commitment wasn't enough, why things kept slipping away just when they were supposed to take shape. But the truth is far gentler than the story you told yourself. Those efforts didn't fail because you were lacking. They failed because the timeline you were standing in had already dissolved beneath your feet. A timeline begins to end long before you notice the collapse. Energetically, it loosens. It thins out. It stops supporting certain outcomes because your deeper self is no longer aligned with them. When you tried to force things to work during that phase, you were working inside a structure that was already disappearing. You were trying to build on ground that was quietly giving way, not as a punishment, but as protection. Life will not reinforce a direction that pulls you away from who you are meant to become. Think of all the strategies you attempted, the solutions you repeated, the patience you practiced. None of it was wasted. It simply wasn't meant to stabilize anything in a reality that was no longer yours. You couldn't gain traction because the timeline itself wasn't holding you. You were walking on something that was dissolving with every step, and instead of recognizing the misalignment, you assumed you were the problem. You weren't. You were evolving out of the conditions that once shaped your choices. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to succeed inside a reality that is already ending. You feel like you're pushing against invisible resistance, like progress collapses the moment you make it, like the universe keeps redirecting you without explanation. That resistance wasn't rejection. It was guidance. It was life quietly nudging you away from the version of yourself you no longer fit into. When you look back now, you can see how nothing was ever truly lost. The things that didn't solidify were the things that wouldn't have held up in the life you're stepping into. The doors that didn't open were the ones that would have led you in circles. The plans that fell apart were the plans that belonged to an identity you were already shedding. Misalignment was the cause, not inadequacy. And once you understand that, something inside you softens. The pressure lifts. The self-blame dissolves. You begin to see that your past wasn't a series of mistakes but a series of signals, each one showing you that your deeper self was already choosing a different direction. Nothing worked because you weren't meant to remain where you were. And now that you've crossed into a new frequency, you can finally feel what was trying to reach you all along. You didn't fail. You outgrew the timeline where those efforts belonged. You've been preparing for this moment far longer than you realized, not through rituals or conscious effort, but through every challenge that asked you to hold yourself together when life felt unsteady. Each time you faced something that stretched you beyond what you thought you could handle, your inner field strengthened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But beneath your awareness, your system was learning how to stay coherent even when the world around you felt fragmented. That resilience wasn't accidental. It was the groundwork for the frequency you now inhabit. Think of the moments when you felt pushed to your edge. Moments when you had to steady your breath before speaking. Moments when you carried yourself through a day you weren't sure you could complete. Moments when you made a choice not because it was easy but because it was the only way to stay true to something you couldn't yet name. These moments didn't just test you, they shaped you. They taught your system how to hold alignment in uncertainty. That capacity is what allows you to stabilize in a new timeline now. Most of the preparation happened so quietly you mistook it for routine survival. You thought you were simply enduring another difficult phase. But endurance is not passive. It reorganizes you from the inside out. Every time you centered yourself after being shaken, every time you realigned after being surprised, every time you chose honesty over fear, you were strengthening the exact internal circuitry that this timeline requires. The field you're in now responds to coherence, and coherence is something hardship taught you without ceremony. There's a reason you didn't feel ready before the shift. Preparation doesn't feel like preparation while it's happening. It feels like tension, confusion, adaptation, recalibration. It feels like holding yourself together in ways you weren't sure were possible. That work was invisible but profound. It built the emotional steadiness and intuitive sensitivity that allows you to recognize subtle shifts now, to feel the difference between who you were and who you're becoming, to sense the new trajectory before it fully appears. What looked like struggle was training. What looked like stagnation was strengthening. What looked like repetition was refinement. You were not stuck, you were becoming stable enough to inhabit a version of reality that operates at a higher level of clarity. This is why you can perceive the shift so distinctly now. Your system is no longer overwhelmed by change. It's receptive to it. When you look back at the hardest seasons of your life, try to see them not as detours but as the quiet preparation your awakening required. Each challenge calibrated you. Each moment of resilience widened your capacity. You learned how to stay connected to yourself even when old identities were dissolving. That skill is what allows you to stand here now with a sense of groundedness, rather than fear, as everything around you begins to rearrange. You didn't prepare consciously. You prepared by living. Your identity is not a set of traits or memories but a field, a subtle frequency that shapes how reality arranges itself around you, and the moment you understand this, the world begins to make sense in a way it never has before. Who you believe you are becomes the organizing principle of your experience. It decides what you notice, what you dismiss, what you attract, and what you no longer have access to. Not because belief is magic, but because your self-concept acts like a tuning fork, drawing you into the version of reality that matches its vibration. You do not perceive the world as it is. You perceive the world as the identity you are currently resonating with. This is why two people can live through the same moment and experience entirely different realities. One sees possibility while the other sees limitation. One feels guided while the other feels abandoned. The external circumstances may be identical, but the frequency of the observer determines the frame through which everything is interpreted. When your identity shifts, your lens shifts. When your lens shifts, your reality reorganizes. It's not metaphorical. It's mechanical. Consciousness selects the frame before the mind notices it has chosen. Think of your identity as the central signal that your entire reality system orients itself around. Your nervous system calibrates to it. Your emotional responses harmonize with it. Your thoughts and expectations follow its lead. Even your intuition takes shape through the filter of who you believe yourself to be. When you operate from an identity that is outdated or constricted, the world mirrors that constriction back to you. Not because the world is limited, but because you are tuned to a limited frequency within it. As your identity evolves, you begin to perceive timelines that were invisible before. Possibilities that once felt unreachable suddenly appear obvious. Solutions that seemed complicated reveal themselves with ease. People respond differently, not because they have changed, but because they are now meeting a different version of you. The field adjusts instantly when your internal signal updates. This is why the work is never about forcing outcomes. It's about recognizing the identity from which you are moving and allowing that recognition to shift the frame. This doesn't require effort. It requires awareness. To notice when you're acting from who you used to be rather than who you are now. To feel the subtle difference between choosing from fear and choosing from alignment. To sense the moment your inner frequency rises into a version of yourself that sees reality through a wider window. These are not dramatic leaps. They are quiet, steady shifts that accumulate until the world around you can no longer remain the same. You are not trying to become someone new. You are learning to inhabit the identity that is already emerging. And the moment you claim that frequency, even internally, even silently, the field begins to reorganize around you with a precision that feels both scientific and mystical at the same time. Your body has been feeling things your mind didn't have the words for, subtle changes in rhythm and sensation that seemed random at first, but none of them were random. When you entered a new timeline, your biology began the work of reorganizing itself to match the identity you're growing into. Coherence is not an abstract idea. It's physical. It shows up in your breath, in the way your chest loosens without reason, in the way your thoughts slow just enough for you to notice the space between them. These sensations are the body integrating a frequency it couldn't hold before. Every shift in identity creates a shift in physiology, because your nervous system has been shaped around the version of you that lived in the old timeline. When that timeline dissolves, the patterns inside you that were built to maintain it begin to dissolve as well. This is why certain reactions you used to have don't fire anymore. Why tension you carried for years suddenly feels unnecessary. Why you might feel waves of tiredness followed by surprising clarity. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It's recalibrating. Think about how you used to brace yourself without noticing. How you would tighten around expectations or fears that felt normal at the time. All of that bracing was part of the old frequency. When you stepped into the new timeline, those patterns no longer matched the environment you were entering, so your body began releasing them. Sometimes gently, sometimes all at once. The release can feel like calm, or it can feel like disorientation, or like a strange softness settling over you. Whatever form it takes, it is coherence emerging. Coherence is the state in which your body, mind, and identity are moving together instead of pulling against each other. It's when the signals inside you stop contradicting the path your consciousness is choosing. You may notice that decisions feel simpler, not because life is easier, but because your system isn't scattering energy in every direction anymore. You may sense a quiet strength in you that wasn't there before. You may find yourself breathing differently, speaking differently, or responding to situations with a steadiness you don't remember learning. You didn't force this. Your biology learned it as your identity shifted. You'll also feel coherence in the absence of old symptoms. Mental loops that used to run endlessly start losing their grip. Emotional tension that once rose automatically now fades before it fully forms. Your body is no longer preparing for realities that don't exist in the timeline you've entered. It only prepares for what matches you now. This is why the changes feel subtle yet undeniable. Your system is aligning itself with a trajectory that feels more natural than anything you've known before. You are not becoming someone new, you are finally functioning in harmony with the identity that has been emerging within you. And as coherence deepens, the life that matches this identity begins to take shape with increasing clarity. The new timeline responds before you take a single step, and this can feel almost unreal at first because you're used to a world where effort comes before movement, where you push and wait, where you act and hope for a result. But in the reality you've entered, the field doesn't wait for action. It reacts to your clarity. It mirrors your internal state long before your body has the chance to follow through. You shift inside, and the world shifts around you. The response is immediate because there is no longer any distance between your intention and the environment that receives it. You may have already begun noticing this in small ways. You think about releasing something, and within hours the situation rearranges itself to make that release easier. You entertain a new possibility, and suddenly an opportunity appears that aligns with the direction you were only beginning to consider. You soften a fear, and the external trigger that kept activating it loses its intensity. These aren't coincidences. They are reflections. The field is responding to your internal adjustment in real time, not because you are suddenly lucky but because there is no energetic lag in a timeline aligned with your emerging identity. This is what immediacy feels like. Not speed. Not intensity. Immediacy. A reality that reorganizes itself based on what you are, not what you do. Your external world has become sensitive to the subtle shifts within you. When you gain clarity, even quietly, the field receives that clarity as instruction. When you release doubt, even briefly, the field responds by removing friction. When you hold a truth steadily, without forcing it, the field begins shaping circumstances that match it. This is why effort feels unnatural now. Action that contradicts your internal state falls flat. Movement that comes from fear produces resistance. But when your action matches your frequency, the world opens without strain. The field isn't rewarding you, it's mirroring you. It is coherent with the version of you that has already stepped into the shift. You're learning to live in a reality where the internal step is the real step, and the external one is simply the echo. Everything you used to chase comes toward you the moment your inner state aligns with it. Everything you used to resist dissolves the moment you no longer resonate with it. This responsiveness isn't fragile. It's natural. It's how timelines behave when you're no longer operating from fragmentation. If you allow yourself to trust this, the world begins to feel less like something you must push into place and more like something that adjusts around you as you adjust within yourself. The field is not separate from you. It is the extension of your identity interacting with form. And when this understanding clicks open inside you, touch the like button to keep this frequency circulating in your field, because recognizing this coherence is what allows you to navigate the new reality with precision instead of effort. There is a version of you that has been guiding this transition from a distance, a quieter intelligence that moves beneath your thoughts and does not speak in words, yet its influence has shaped every turning point that brought you here. You may think the shift began when your life started unraveling or when circumstances changed, but it started much earlier, in a place inside you that sensed the trajectory you were on and knew it could not take you where you were meant to go. Before you felt the collapse, this deeper self had already chosen it. You've met this part of yourself before, although you may not have recognized it. It appears in the moments when clarity arrives without effort, when you suddenly know what you can no longer tolerate or what you must walk toward even without understanding why. It's the intelligence that whispers the truth before you're ready to act on it. It's the subtle pull that steers you away from what drains you and toward what feels inevitable, even when it doesn't make logical sense. This is not intuition alone. It is identity memory rising to the surface, the future self reaching back to guide you forward. If you look closely at your life, you'll notice the threads. Times when you hesitated without knowing why, only to later realize that hesitation protected you. Times when you felt compelled to let go even though letting go made no sense. Times when you didn't fight as hard as you once would have because something in you already understood the outcome. These weren't accidents. They were expressions of the self that stands beyond the version you believed yourself to be, an intelligence that sees the arc of your life from a vantage point you cannot access moment to moment. This deeper identity doesn't force. It redirects. It doesn't shout. It nudges. When an old timeline can no longer serve your evolution, it withdraws your energy from it, and the withdrawal feels like confusion at first because your conscious mind hasn't caught up. But the collapse itself, the moment the old reality released you, was chosen by the part of you that refuses to let you shrink into a life that can't hold your expansion. Meeting this version of yourself is not about imagining a higher being separate from you. It's about recognizing the qualities you felt emerging, the steadiness, the knowing, the clarity that arrives without analysis. These sensations are not new. They are reminders of who you've always been beneath the noise. The shift didn't introduce them. It revealed them. As you sense this presence more clearly, the journey becomes intimate rather than overwhelming. You understand that you weren't abandoned in the collapse, you were escorted through it. You were being moved by the self that exists on the other side of the threshold you are now crossing. And the more you listen to that steady, subtle guidance, the more the path in front of you begins to take shape exactly the way it was always meant to. There comes a point in every shift when you realize you are no longer able to return to the person you once were, not because you're resisting the past, but because the version of you who lived there simply no longer exists. The old self was woven from beliefs, habits, emotional patterns and survival strategies that belong to a timeline that has already dissolved. You may try to revisit old behaviors, reach for familiar dynamics, or step back into roles that once defined you, yet something in you doesn't move the same way anymore. The impulses that once felt automatic don't rise. The motivations that once guided you don't ignite. This isn't failure. It's evolution. Regression becomes impossible when the identity that supported your old life has completed its purpose. You can remember that version of yourself, you can feel compassion for them, but you can't inhabit them again. The frequency that shaped them is gone. Their fears don't fit you anymore. Their coping mechanisms feel foreign. Even their dreams may feel strangely outdated, as if they belong to someone you used to care for but no longer recognize as yourself. This is the natural consequence of stepping into a new timeline. The doorway behind you doesn't lock, it simply disappears. You might notice this most in moments when you attempt to revisit old patterns. Something in you pauses. Not out of resistance, but out of neutrality. The emotional charge isn't there. The old reaction doesn't activate. The script your life used to follow no longer plays in your mind. You're not fighting to be different. You simply are. The shift already rewired the internal pathways that once anchored you to past versions of yourself. What used to feel like the only way to navigate life now feels too small for the person you're becoming. This brings a strange kind of closure, not dramatic, not explosive, but gentle and undeniable. You may look back at certain chapters and realize you couldn't return even if you tried. The relationships that once made sense no longer match your inner pace. The identities you once performed feel tight around the edges. The choices you would have made without hesitation now feel impossible to embody. This is not loss. It is release. You are leaving behind only what cannot survive the frequency you now hold. And with this realization comes an unexpected peace. You understand that the past is complete, not because you forced yourself forward, but because your evolution made it effortless to step out of what used to confine you. The old self didn't fail. It finished. It carried you until you could meet the version of yourself who is capable of walking the next part of your path. You are not abandoning that self. You are honoring them by becoming the person they always hoped you'd grow into. The path behind you has already dissolved. The only direction that remains is the one that matches the identity you have quietly stepped into. Your new identity doesn't ask you to strive or to chase or to prove anything. It asks for something far quieter, something that may feel unfamiliar because it doesn't come from effort. What this timeline requires from you is presence. Not the kind of presence that demands perfection or constant awareness, but the kind that lets you meet your own experience without pulling yourself backward into who you used to be or forward into who you think you should become. Presence is the bridge that stabilizes the shift because it anchors you in the frequency you are already inhabiting. You've lived most of your life trying to adjust yourself to timelines that didn't match you, constantly scanning, predicting, compensating. But here, in this new trajectory, those habits don't work. This reality doesn't respond to effort in the old sense. It responds to coherence, to authenticity, to the simplicity of showing up as the identity that is already unfolding within you. When you drift into old patterns, you can feel the friction immediately. Not as punishment, but as feedback. It's your system showing you that your new alignment can't be stabilized by the strategies of your former self. Presence is not something to practice. It is something to allow. It's the moment you soften into the truth that you don't have to manage your transformation. You only have to inhabit it. When you are present, even briefly, you become the clearest signal in your own field, and the timeline responds by organizing around that signal. Thoughts slow. The body loosens. Your choices feel quieter but more certain. You stop performing and start participating in the life that is forming around you. This timeline doesn't need you to be confident or decisive or unwavering. It only needs you to be here. To feel the subtle yes inside you. To notice when something aligns without overthinking it. To pause long enough to sense when something doesn't. Presence is the way your emerging identity speaks. It shows you where to move by how your energy shifts, how your breathing changes, how your inner landscape opens or contracts. The more you notice these cues, the easier it becomes to follow the version of you that already knows the path. There is no urgency in this requirement. You don't have to hold presence every moment. You don't have to force stillness or manufacture clarity. The shift has already happened. Presence simply allows you to stabilize in it rather than slipping into old frameworks that no longer support your trajectory. When you are present, even in the smallest ways, you confirm to the field that you are inhabiting the identity that chose this timeline. This is all that's being asked of you now. Not action. Not speed. Not certainty. Just the willingness to meet yourself where you are, without rushing back into the patterns of the past or reaching ahead into a future that hasn't been shaped yet. Presence is the instruction of this timeline because presence is the only place where the new version of you can fully exist. Some thoughts and emotions still rise as if they belong to the person you used to be, and when they appear, it can feel like you've slipped backward, as though the shift you made wasn't as complete as you hoped. But what you're experiencing are echoes, not regressions. They are leftover patterns from a timeline that no longer holds you, small vibrations from an identity that once shaped your responses but no longer determines your path. An echo can sound convincing because it carries the tone of the past, yet it has no substance. It cannot pull you back unless you mistake it for who you still are. When a timeline dissolves, it doesn't disappear cleanly. It fades out of your energetic field the same way as sound fades out of a room after the source has gone quiet. Your nervous system, your emotional body, your familiar thoughts, they continue releasing old signals for a while because that was their rhythm for so long. This is why you might suddenly feel a wave of doubt, or an old fear might flicker across your awareness, or a memory might surface with surprising intensity. Nothing is wrong. Your system is emptying itself of what no longer belongs to the identity you're settling into. The important thing is recognizing the difference between an echo and a return. An echo feels like something passing through you. It doesn't anchor. It doesn't take hold. It rises, it moves across your awareness, and it dissolves when you don't engage with it. A return feels sticky, patterned, familiar in a way that tries to pull you back into roles or reactions. What you're experiencing now is the first one, the passing signals of a self that has already stepped into closure. Witnessing these remnants becomes easier when you remember that echoes arrive because the system is recalibrating, not because you're losing alignment. They are proof that integration is happening. Every time an old reaction appears and you don't automatically follow it, your coherence deepens. Every time an old thought arises and you recognize it as outdated, the new identity strengthens its hold. What once guided you now simply crosses your awareness like a shadow moving across a wall, visible but powerless. There is no need to resist these moments or interpret them as setbacks. Resistance only gives echoes weight. Instead, let them pass through you the way a distant sound passes through a quiet room. Notice them. Breathe with them. Allow them to complete their exit. This is how you stabilize the new timeline, not by preventing echoes, but by not confusing them with truth. Forward momentum remains intact even when remnants appear, because momentum is created by your current identity, not your past emotions. The path you're walking doesn't disappear because an old feeling visited you. It remains open, steady, and aligned with the person you are now. And with each echo that fades, you become more attuned to the version of yourself that is no longer remembering the past but actively creating the future. There is a moment in every shift when the new timeline stops feeling conceptual and begins to take shape inside your body, and this is where grounding becomes essential, not as a complex practice or a demanding discipline, but as a single, simple act that tells your system it is safe to inhabit the identity you have already stepped into. The ritual is not about forcing coherence. It is about allowing it. It's the moment where your inner state and your physical presence meet each other without resistance, and in that meeting, the new reality anchors itself more deeply than thought ever could. Begin by bringing your attention to the center of your chest, not to search for anything, but simply to notice what is already there. Your awareness is the ritual's foundation. As you settle into that space, breathe, not to change your breath, but to watch it move. Feel the inhale gather your energy inward. Feel the exhale release the remnants of the old rhythm. Each cycle is a quiet confirmation that your body is learning to trust the frequency of the life you are entering. You're not trying to reach stillness. You're letting the stillness that already exists rise to the surface. Now, bring into your awareness the feeling of the version of you that has been emerging throughout this shift. Not an image, not a story, just the sensation of them. The softness in your chest. The steadiness in your breath. The clarity that flickers behind your thoughts. Hold that sensation gently, the way you would hold something delicate that does not need to be controlled. This is coherence, your inner and outer selves attuning to each other without effort. The ritual is simply this moment. This noticing. This quiet alignment. When you breathe with the awareness of your emerging identity, something settles. Your shoulders release a tension you didn't know you were carrying. Your mind loosens its grip on old narratives. Your body begins to reorganize around the truth you're allowing yourself to feel. You are telling the field, without a single word, that you are ready to inhabit the space it has been preparing for you. This anchoring doesn't require time. It requires sincerity. Even a few seconds of true awareness can stabilize what felt uncertain. You'll know it's working because the world around you will feel ever so slightly more grounded, as if the timeline you're entering has stepped 1 degree closer to you. The ritual doesn't pull you into the new reality, it allows the new reality to meet you. You can return to this moment whenever you need. Not to fix anything, but to remember. To remember that you are not drifting. You are integrating. To remember that your body is the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. And to remember that the simplest act of coherence is enough to stabilize the shift that has already taken place. The ritual is not something you perform. It is something you inhabit. The life that's waiting for you isn't somewhere far ahead, and it isn't something you need to chase or earn. It's already formed, already humming in the background of your awareness, already aligning itself with every quiet shift you've made inside. The only step remaining is not forward but inward, into inhabiting the identity that has been unfolding throughout this journey. When a new timeline stabilizes, it doesn't pull you in with force. It opens a space and waits for you to recognize yourself inside it. You may feel this as a subtle clarity, a sense that certain choices now feel natural when they once felt out of reach. You may feel less attached to the versions of yourself you perform to belong, and more drawn toward the version that feels effortless, honest, unforced. These sensations are not coincidences. They are invitations. The new reality is not asking you to become anything. It's asking you to step into what you've already become. Walking into this version of your life doesn't require grand gestures or sudden decisions. It begins with noticing the pathways that open easily and the ones that feel heavy. It begins with honoring the impulses that feel clean and grounded instead of the ones rooted in fear or habit. It begins with trusting that the expanded identity you've been sensing is not an aspiration, it's your center now. You're not transitioning into it. You're realizing you've already arrived. As you inhabit this identity more fully, the world adjusts around you in ways that feel almost too synchronized to dismiss. Conversations shift. Opportunities rearrange themselves. People respond to you differently, not because they've changed, but because you're meeting them from a steadier, clearer presence. This is what embodiment looks like, living as though the new timeline is real because, on a frequency level, it already is. There is a quiet inevitability to this stage. You can feel that going back isn't possible, not because you're resisting the past, but because you no longer resonate with it. Forward movement doesn't feel like striving. It feels like stepping into a room where the atmosphere matches your breath. The more you recognize this, the easier the path becomes. Alignment replaces effort. Clarity replaces confusion. Expansion replaces hesitation. The version of life waiting for you is not a distant future. It's the reality that forms the moment you inhabit the identity that chose this timeline. Every step you take now is not about becoming someone new but about allowing yourself to live as the person your deeper intelligence has been guiding you toward. There is nothing left to chase. There is only the life rising to meet you at the frequency you now hold. And when you feel the moment you first sensed this shift, the moment your old timeline loosened and a new one began to breathe through you, comment it, because naming that moment doesn't just acknowledge your transformation. It anchors it. It signals to your field that you are ready to walk fully into the life that has been waiting for you all along.